Imagine you're 30,000 feet in the air, your life hanging by a thread as the entire flight crew falls unconscious after eating spoiled fish. In this desperate situation, your only hope rests in the hands of a former pilot suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, working alongside an inflatable autopilot doll in a captain's uniform. You are probably thinking this is a high-stakes, thrilling disaster movie, right? Well, you are dead wrong. This was the greatest trick in cinema history, titled Airplane, released in 1980. From a low-budget project neglected by Hollywood giants, this film created a massive explosion, turning terrifying disaster tropes into an eternal monument of comedy. Airplane did not just change how we perceive the parody genre, it became an essential part of popular culture for over 4 decades. So, are you the type of person who loves direct, unbelievably absurd humor, or do you prefer deep, sharp, and subtle satire? If you have seen this movie and laughed until your stomach hurt, please comment number 1 right below the video. If you have not seen it yet but are extremely curious why an old movie makes the whole world go crazy, leave a comment with number 2 so we can know. And now, please fasten your seatbelts, adjust your seating for maximum comfort, because the journey to discover the 15 craziest secrets hidden behind this fateful flight will officially begin right now. 1. Origin from a VCR mistake. To understand how a comedy as crazy as Airplane could be born, we must travel back in time to the late 70s, to the small apartment of the legendary directing trio ZAZ, consisting of David Zucker, Jim Abrahams, and Jerry Zucker. At that time, they were not cinema moguls, but just enthusiastic young men operating a comedy troupe called the Kentucky Fried Theater. Their method of searching for ideas was just as strange as the movies they made. Every night, they would set an old VCR machine to record all the commercials broadcast at midnight and dawn. Their original goal was simple: to find silly commercials, weird products, or naive editing errors to bring to their satirical stage. However, destiny truly knocked on the door one morning when Jerry Zucker checked the tape and discovered that the VCR had not stopped after the commercials ended. Due to a small technical error, or perhaps because they forgot to set the off timer, the machine continued to record an entire black and white movie titled 0 Hour, produced in 1957. When the three sat down together to watch that tape, a miracle happened. Instead of feeling bored with an outdated disaster movie, they laughed uncontrollably because of the extreme seriousness of the actors in the film. Every stiff line of dialogue, every intense gaze, and the high-tension atmosphere about a food poisoning incident on a plane became perfectly ridiculous in the eyes of the Zaz group. They realized that if they kept this tragic script but replaced it with absurd situations, they would have a comedy goldmine. The carelessness of the VCR accidentally gave them a complete plot structure without any effort. That coincidence led to one of the most profitable deals in film history. 2. A billion-dollar deal for only $2,500. Continuing the story of the fateful VCR machine, we come to one of the smartest and most unbelievable business moves in Hollywood history. After the ZAZ group realized that the old movie 0 Hour was the perfect skeleton for their comedy masterpiece, they faced a difficult legal problem. In the movie capital, the line between taking inspiration and plagiarism is extremely thin. If they just went ahead and made the film, the lawyers of the old production company would surely jump in and sue them into bankruptcy as soon as the movie premiered. Instead of trying to bypass the law or change the plot to hide, the three directors decided to make a straightforward and extremely bold move. They would buy the rights to the original film outright. However, in 1979, the movie 0 Hour was considered a failure, completely forgotten in dusty archives and having no commercial value to major studios. When the ZAZ representatives asked to buy the rights, the owners even felt it was ridiculous because they did not understand who would want to pay money for a pile of old materials like that. Finally, a contract was quickly signed at a price that would make anyone gasp: only $2,500. To help you visualize, this amount was only equivalent to the price of a few airplane tires at that time, or even just a small fraction of the costume costs for A-list stars. With that tiny amount of money, the Zaz Group officially owned the entire script structure, character names, and even the most iconic dialogues of the original film to transform them into a comedy style. This was truly a billion-dollar deal in the literal sense, because from this dirt-cheap initial investment, they molded a masterpiece that brought in a huge revenue of over $170 million globally, a profit tens of thousands of times higher than the original cost. With the script in hand, it was time to find someone to take the wheel, but their criteria for choosing a pilot was very strange. 3. Robert Hayes is a real pilot. When the script was secured at an unimaginably cheap price, the Zaz Group began the most important phase, searching for a lead actor to play Ted Stryker, a former pilot suffering from psychological trauma who was forced to fly a plane to save hundreds of lives. The casting process was extremely rigorous in Hollywood, where a series of A-list stars and the most handsome faces of the time came hoping for a role of a lifetime. However, among a forest of polished actors, Robert Hays appeared and won convincingly thanks to an advantage that no cinematic effect could replace. The real reason Robert Hays beat all opponents was not just in his deadpan acting ability, but because he was a real pilot in real life. Before entering the arts, Hays had spent a lot of time in the sky and held an official private pilot license. This might not seem important for a comedy, but for the directors, it was the key to creating maximum authenticity. During scenes in the cockpit full of buttons and complex control panels, while other actors struggled to remember where to touch correctly, Robert Hays performed those operations as fluently as an instinct. His knowledge of aviation helped Hays not need to spend any mind on pretending to be a pilot. He could pull the control lever while checking pressure gauges in the most natural way, to devote 100% of his focus to performing silly lines and hilarious expressions. The rhythmic coordination between the professional hands of a real pilot and the anxious face of a panicking person created an irreplaceable Ted Stryker. This naturalness made the audience completely believe in the setting of the film, making the comedic elements explode more than ever. 4. Rejections from superstars. Although Robert Hays eventually became the soul of the movie, if you look at the list of names once considered or who auditioned, you will see the reality that Airplane almost became a completely different movie with the most powerful faces in the entertainment world. Most notable is David Letterman, who later became a legend of late-night talk shows in America. At that time, Letterman auditioned for the character Ted Stryker with many expectations. However, his audition quickly became a disaster in the literal sense. Even though David Letterman was an extremely smart and funny person, he made a fatal mistake that the Zaz directors hated. He could not keep a serious face. Every time he read the silly lines in the script, Letterman could not control himself and revealed a smile or a look as if he wanted to wink at the audience to say, "Hey, I know this is very funny, right?" That acting like he was in a comedy face caused him to be rejected immediately because the directors wanted someone to play this role as if they were in a classic Shakespearean disaster movie, not a comedy play. On the side of the female cast, the regret was even greater when the name Sigourney Weaver was put on the scale for the role of Elaine Dickinson. Weaver was then a rising star with sharp beauty and excellent internal acting ability. The producers were very eager to have her signature to add weight to the film. However, after reading the script, she decided to decline to devote all her heart to another project named Alien by director Ridley Scott. This refusal accidentally created two extremes. Weaver became an icon of the horror action genre, while Airplane found a supporting cast that could not be mistaken for anyone else. It is hard to imagine if these superstars had agreed whether the movie would have kept the naive but extremely attractive quality like the version we are watching today. 5. The deadpan principle. To understand why rejections from superstars like David Letterman were actually a blessing for the film, we must dissect the core artistic philosophy applied by the director trio ZAZ. This is the deadpan principle, also known as the straight-faced acting style. This was not just a technical requirement, it became an iron law on the set of Airplane. The directors gave a very strange instruction to the entire cast. Act as if you are participating in the most serious, most tragic disaster movie in the history of world cinema. You are absolutely not allowed to know you are performing a comedy. The reason for this principle is that the filmmakers believed laughter would explode most powerfully when there is an extreme contradiction between the character attitude and the actual situation. If an actor is self-aware that their dialogue is silly and intentionally acts to be funny, the comedic quality will immediately evaporate. Instead, they force the actors to maintain an emotionless face, eyes burning with determination, and a voice full of responsibility even when they were talking about the most nonsensical things. It was the extreme seriousness of the characters in an utterly ridiculous context that created a huge force, making the audience burst into laughter because of that irony. Veteran actors like Robert Stack, Lloyd Bridges, or Peter Graves were initially very confused by this request. They were stars specialized in heavy drama and action roles, and suddenly they were asked to keep that exact style in a movie where everything around them was chaotic. However, that face, without a single wrinkle of humor, was the key to success. The audience did not laugh because the actors performed comedy. They laughed because they saw mature, powerful people handling a mess with a completely inappropriate solemnity. This is the greatest legacy the film left for the parody genre later on. 6. Leslie Nielsen and the Fart Machine. Speaking of the deadpan principle, perhaps the person who performed it most excellently, and also the one who broke the seriousness of the crew the most, was the legend Leslie Nielsen. Before joining Airplane, Leslie was known as a serious drama actor with a dignified appearance, specializing in roles of elegant gentlemen or influential characters. However, behind that stern look was a mischievous soul second to none. His secret weapon that he always carried throughout the filming process was not a backup script, but a small rubber fart machine hidden in his palm. Leslie Nielsen had a quirky hobby of using this machine at the most unexpected times to test the patience of his colleagues. Imagine, when other actors were straining to keep the coldest face possible for an important scene, a loud, sensitive noise would erupt from behind them. Leslie always did it with a straight face, even pretending to be disgusted or looking at the person next to him as if they were the culprit. This prank was so classic that it became a part of his brand, leaving the whole set both frustrated and unable to stop laughing. The mischief of Leslie did not stop at the film set. The story goes that even after the film became a huge success and he was invited to the White House for a party, he did not forget to bring this toy. In a formal atmosphere with the presence of the most powerful figures in America, Leslie Nielsen still nonchalantly set off the machine right in the middle of intense political conversations. This action did not make him hated. On the contrary, it broke the ice of formality, bringing refreshing laughter to everyone. That undying, humorous spirit transformed Leslie from an ordinary actor into a global icon of satirical comedy. 7. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and the $30,000 carpet. In the cast list of Airplane, there is a name that surprised both the sports and cinema worlds when appearing on screen, and that is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. At that time, Kareem was not just an ordinary basketball player. He was a god in the NBA League, a superstar center for the Los Angeles Lakers with a giant height and legendary fame. Inviting a world-class superstar like him to join a low-budget comedy was almost unthinkable. In fact, when he received the invitation from the ZAZ directors for the role of co-pilot Roger Murdoch, Kareem flatly refused because he felt he was not suitable for this ridiculous genre of film. However, destiny turned in a very practical and somewhat material way. Right while the production team was struggling to find a replacement, Kareem suddenly changed his mind and agreed to participate. The reason behind this decision was not because he suddenly loved the script, but because of a carpet. Yes, you heard that right. Kareem was a person with a passionate interest in collecting antiques and oriental artworks. At that time, he had his eyes on an extremely rare and sophisticated Persian carpet being offered on the market. The only problem was that the carpet had a price tag of $30,000, a significant amount in 1980. Kareem set a condition for the film crew that he would take the role if the salary was paid exactly equal to the value of that carpet. The filmmakers grabbed this opportunity immediately. They agreed to pay $30,000 to exchange for the presence of a basketball legend in the cockpit. This is perhaps one of the strangest salary agreements in Hollywood history, when an iconic role was traded for a high-end piece of furniture. Thanks to that carpet, the audience had the chance to witness the classic comedic scenes between a little boy and a pilot with legs too long for the seat. 8. Sarcasm about defensive ability. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar accepting a movie role to trade for a precious Persian carpet was already a funny story, but the way he faced criticisms about his career right in the film was truly admirable. In an iconic scene, when a little boy is allowed to visit the cockpit and realizes co-pilot Roger Murdoch is actually the basketball superstar Kareem, the boy does not hesitate to throw out harsh comments. The boy says his father told him Kareem is a lazy player, never running back to the home court to support the defense, and often leaving his teammates to defend against opponent attacks alone. What the audience at that time, and even later, rarely knew is that those lines were not written just for fun. In fact, they were real sarcasm, the most toxic public arrows that the press and NBA fans frequently aimed at Kareem during that period. Despite being a great scorer, due to health and age issues, he was often criticized for lacking enthusiasm in defense. For a world-class professional athlete, being criticized for their playing attitude is a pain and a great insult to self-respect. However, instead of avoiding it or asking to edit the script to protect his personal image, Kareem decided to face it in the most artistic way, which is self-mockery. He accepted bringing his real-life criticisms into the film and acted with a face that was both annoyed and ridiculously resigned. This action not only showed the bravery of a big star, but also helped his character become more relatable and vivid than ever. Kareem turned the bitter words from the media into a classic comedy bit, showing that he was not afraid of the conflicting public opinions about his performance on the court. These small self-mocking details contributed to an incredibly massive statistic regarding the density of laughter throughout the film. 9. A density of 260 jokes, or 3 jokes per minute. The self-mockery of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar created valuable moments, but it was just a small part of a giant laughing machine that the Zaz Group operated. To prove the destructive power of this film against the audience stomach, film researchers and dedicated fans conducted a very meticulous statistic. The results showed that in the total duration of only 88 minutes of Airplane, there were about 260 comedic situations integrated. If we perform a simple calculation, this number is equivalent to the fact that every minute that passes, viewers will receive an average of nearly 3 different jokes. This is an unprecedented density of humor, and even today, there are rarely any movies that can break this record. The reason this number reached such a terrible level is because the directors used an all-out attack strategy. Laughter does not only come from the silly dialogue of the actors on screen, but it is also hidden everywhere. It could be a strange text on a sign in the distance of the airport, a quirky action of an extra walking by, or even an inanimate object suddenly transforming in an irrational way. The Zaz Group created a world where every frame is a goldmine of satirical humor. This creates a very interesting pressure for the viewer. You are absolutely not allowed to be distracted. Just by looking down to pick up a piece of popcorn or turning to whisper to the person next to you for about 10 seconds, you will surely miss at least one twist or a cleverly planted comedic detail. It was this dense filmmaking style that made Airplane a movie that audiences must watch over and over again. Each time you watch, you will discover a new joke that you accidentally missed the previous time because you were busy laughing at the previous situation. This rush not only leaves the audience breathless, but also turns the film into an immortal monument of the parody genre. Not only joking with images right before our eyes, the movie also spectacularly deceived our sense of hearing. 10. The engine sound trick. The rush of images and dialogue in Airplane was enough to stun the audience, but the director trio Zaz wanted to go further by attacking the hearing of the viewers through a very subtle trick. If you are an ordinary person, you might only focus on the chaotic situations on screen without even suspecting what you are hearing. However, for those who are knowledgeable about aviation or those with keen ears, this movie contains a ridiculous contradiction that is unbelievable from the very first seconds the plane takes off. In the film, the plane we see is a Boeing 707, a modern jet, a symbol of advancement and speed at that time. According to normal logic, it should emit a powerful roaring jet engine sound. However, the sound department of the film intentionally did the exact opposite. They used the entire engine sound of old propeller planes from the 1950s, specifically the characteristic sound of bomber planes during the Second World War. The steady and somewhat slow sputtering of the propeller engine sounded beneath the image of a jet flying at supersonic speed, creating a perfectly calculated mismatch. This was not a technical error or a lack of budget, but a joke aimed at the absurdity. The directors wanted to emphasize that in the world of Airplane, nothing follows the rules of reality. This subtlety lies in the fact that it does not need an explanation, but still creates an annoying, funny feeling for those who notice the abnormality. It is like a hidden message to the audience. Do not believe in anything you see, and do not believe in anything you hear. It was these small but quirky sound details that contributed to building a multi-dimensional, humorous space, where even the engine sound could become a real comedian. The subtlety and ability to plant unexpected elements of the film crew also came from inviting illustrious music icons into roles that no one could have ever expected. 11. The final role of Broadway legend Ethel Merman. Following the auditory and visual tricks, Airplane also made enthusiasts bow in admiration by inviting one of the greatest cultural icons to participate in a high-level self-mocking role. One of the most sensational appearances was the participation of Ethel Merman, known as the First Lady of the Broadway stage. For previous generations, Ethel Merman was an untouchable monument with a powerful voice that could shake an entire auditorium without a microphone. Her appearance in such a ridiculous comedy was unbelievable, but the way she transformed into the character was truly an exciting cultural shock. In the film, she played a soldier suffering from post-war shell shock being treated at a military hospital. This character had a bizarre psychological syndrome. He always believed he was actually Ethel Merman. To realize that delusion, the director had the real Ethel Merman play the soldier wearing a military uniform lying on a hospital bed. When the doctors came to check, she suddenly sat up and began singing the legendary song Everything's Coming Up Roses with a booming voice. The contrast between the image of a rugged soldier and her soaring Broadway vocals created a scene that was both weird and hilarious, yet extremely memorable. This was not just an ordinary cameo, it carried great historical significance for both cinema and theater. This was the final time in her illustrious career that Ethel Merman appeared on the big screen before she passed away a few years later. Her agreement to join a rebellious project like Airplane showed a boundless artistic spirit and the self-respect of a great artist willing to turn her own fame into a tool for audience laughter. She left a brilliant and humorous final mark, proving that regardless of age or status, laughter remains the most noble value an artist can contribute. Beside the surprising appearance of the Broadway legend, we also witnessed the return of the perfect mother of America in a very street style. 12. Barbara Billingsley and the Jive Language. The appearance of Ethel Merman was a shock, but the transformation of Barbara Billingsley was truly a pop culture explosion at that time. For the American public in the 50s and 60s, Barbara Billingsley was like a saint on the small screen. She was famous nationwide for her role as June Cleaver in the series Leave It to Beaver, the image of a perfect mother always wearing a flared dress and pearl necklace while gently caring for her family. Therefore, when the Zaz directors looked for someone to play the old lady translating jive, an extremely difficult slang used by the urban African American community, they immediately thought of creating an absolute contrast to generate laughter. Initially, the filmmakers feared that Barbara would feel insulted by such a strange invitation. However, completely contrary to expectations, the veteran actress was extremely excited. She not only accepted immediately, but also proactively offered to study this language seriously. To prepare for a scene lasting only a few minutes, Barbara spent a lot of time researching the intonation, emphasis, and meaning of the slang used by street gangs and youth groups of that era. She wanted to ensure that when she spoke, viewers would be stunned by the opposition between the elegant appearance of a housewife and the gritty street language coming from her mouth. In that classic scene, when two passengers are arguing in words that even the flight crew cannot understand, Barbara Billingsley stands up with the calmest face in the world and proudly declares, "I speak jive." Then, she begins to translate the entire conversation with a professional attitude that was borderline ridiculous. The success of this scene was so great that it completely redefined her career, turning her from a conventional mother figure into a humorous icon loved by young people. Barbara proved that when an actor dares to step out of their comfort zone, they can create immortal cinematic moments. 13. The arguing couple on the airport speakers. If you think that the dry announcement voices at the airport are just pre-programmed tapes, the opening scene of Airplane will completely change your mind. One of the most subtle and authentic details that the Zaz group planted in the film was the endless argument between two announcers about parking in the red zone and the white zone. Interestingly, instead of hiring professional voice actors to mimic the voices, the film crew invited the real-life couple who actually performed this job at Los Angeles International Airport, also known as LAX. This couple was Hal Lohman and Betty Ackerman. They were not just colleagues working in the airport radio room, but also a husband and wife with very interesting personalities. In reality, their job was to read security regulations and parking instructions in the most standard way for passengers to follow. However, when entering the recording studio for the film, the directors encouraged them to bring their actual daily marital conflicts into the announcements. The result was an extremely humorous exchange. From simple parking directions, they quickly shifted to personal attacks, arguing about who was right or wrong, and even hinting at troubles in their marriage right over the public speaker system of the airport. This bickering happened so naturally that the audience felt like they were eavesdropping on a real family war. Using the people who actually did that job in real life created a strange layer of realism for the movie. It made viewers feel familiar with the characteristic airport announcement sound while also laughing at its ridiculous content. This is a testament to how the Zaz group always sought humor in the most ordinary things in life. They turned an anonymous background sound into a valuable comedic material, starting a series of chaotic events about to unfold on the fateful flight. 14. The Bean Dip Incident and the Fan. Ladies and gentlemen, when mentioning the comedies of the ZAZ group, people often remember metaphors that are visualized in a crude but extremely effective way. One of the most iconic moments in Airplane was the scene illustrating the famous English idiom, "when the stuff hits the fan." To realize this saying in the most visual way on screen, the film crew had to design a scene in which a thick liquid would fly directly into an industrial fan spinning at high speed. However, behind the laughter of the audience was a set incident that almost became a serious industrial accident. For hygiene reasons and to create the most realistic visual effect, the props department decided to use a special mixture made from bean dip mixed with several other food additives. This mixture had the perfect consistency and color to simulate waste on film. According to the original plan, the bean mixture would be thrown into the fan from a safe diagonal angle so it would splash around the cockpit. However, when the camera started rolling and the fan was turned on to maximum power, an unintended physical incident occurred. Instead of splashing in the calculated directions, the fan with its giant wind force created a reverse jet stream, pushing the entire mass of bean mixture straight into the faces of the actors standing in front. The pressure from the fan was so strong that it sent the bean dip flying at the speed of a small bullet. The lead actor was struck directly in the face and eyes with extreme force, causing immediate pain. The filming had to stop urgently for medical staff to check, as the sand and small beans in the mixture almost scratched the cornea and caused permanent injury to the actor's eyes. The chaos on the set at that time was no less than what happened in the script. Nevertheless, with a spirit of sacrifice for art, the crew still decided to keep the most authentic footage possible after ensuring the safety of the personnel. These unexpected risks proved that to create a refreshing laugh, filmmakers sometimes have to pay with sweat and dramatic incidents. 15. The battle over the name Flying High. As the incidents on set gradually stabilized and the movie prepared to enter the international market, the producers of Airplane suddenly hit a legal turbulence zone regarding the title of the work. This is a testament to the fierce competition in Hollywood that never stops, even when a film is completed. While North American audiences were very familiar with the short and concise name Airplane, in markets like Australia, New Zealand, and several other countries, this film was known under a completely different name, Flying High. This change was not part of the artistic intent of the Zaz Group, but the result of an intense copyright battle. It all began when Universal Studios, one of the heavy competitors of Paramount Pictures, issued stern legal threats. The reason was that Universal at that time held the rights to a series of famous aviation disaster films titled Airport. They argued that the name Airplane was too similar to their brand and could cause confusion for the audience, leading to a loss of revenue for future projects. To avoid a long and expensive legal battle in international courts, Paramount was forced to compromise and change the title for the film in specific markets. The name Flying High was chosen as a replacement, carrying a meaning of excitement and soaring, but for hardcore fans, it seemed to diminish the direct satire that the original name provided. However, the surprise was that under any name, the attraction of the movie did not decrease at all. In Australia, Flying High became a box office sensation, breaking all records for comedy films of that era. The audience did not care what the title on the poster was. They only cared about the crazy content and the endless laughter the movie brought. The name battle was ultimately just a low note in the brilliantly successful symphony of the work. It proves a truth that a truly good movie will assert its value through its inner quality, not just based on a flashy name on the outside. Ladies and gentlemen, 15 facts, hundreds of jokes, and an eternal legacy. That is all we can say about Airplane. But more than a comedy, this work is a valuable lesson about boundless creativity in art. The Zaz Director Group proved a truth that when you are brave enough to take absolute seriousness as the foundation for the ridiculous, you will create a masterpiece with timeless vitality. Even today, no matter how far cinematic technology has advanced, or how grand action blockbusters have become, the pure smiles brought by Leslie Nielsen, Robert Hayes, or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar never go out of style. Airplane taught us that laughter does not need flowery explanations, it only needs surprise and the enthusiasm of professionals. From a mistake of forgetting to turn off a VCR to a $30,000 carpet, every random piece has created a perfect picture. Thank you for joining the Top Old Movies channel on this unstable but extremely interesting flight. Those behind-the-scenes stories once again affirm the status of the forefather of the parody genre that Airplane has held for over 4 decades. Do not forget to hit like and subscribe right now so you do not miss the next classic cinematic secrets we are about to reveal. In your opinion, among the 15 facts just mentioned, what made you feel the most shocked? Or do you have an old movie you want us to dissect in future episodes? Please leave your comments right below. We always listen to all your shares. Now, wish you a day full of joy, and always remember this most important advice: never eat the fish on a plane. Goodbye, and see you again in the next journeys.